The diplomatic outpost shimmered under the twin suns of Archelion 7, its crystalline spires reflecting rainbows across the surrounding plains. It was a monumental day for humanity. A fragile ceasefire between Earth and the Archelions had paved the way for this historic gathering. Inside the Grand Chamber, Captain Olivia Trenholm stood as a beacon of human diplomacy, her sleek navy blue uniform immaculate, her posture commanding. The room buzzed with activity. Human delegates exchanged polite nods with Archelion Council members, who floated slightly off the ground thanks to the planet's unique gravitational properties. The chamber itself was a marvel of alien engineering, walls that seemed to breathe with a subtle rhythm, shifting colors from deep indigo to golden hues depending on the mood of the speakers. Olivia scanned the room, her diplomatic instincts sharp. The Archelions were an enigmatic species, tall, lithe, with skin that shimmered like liquid metal. Their eyes glowed faintly, a reflection of their bioelectrical energy. Most of the council seemed amicable, but there was an undercurrent of tension that Olivia couldn't ignore. "Captain Trenholm," murmured Commander Andrus, her second-in-command, through the earpiece. "The Erebus is monitoring. We've got your back if anything goes south." "Thanks, Andrus," Olivia replied softly, her eyes never leaving the council leader, High Chancellor Altar. The Archelion leader extended his long-fingered hand toward her, a gesture of welcome that she returned with a firm handshake. "We hope this marks the beginning of a new chapter," Olivia said, her voice steady. "One where our species can coexist and thrive." But not everyone in the chamber shared her optimism. From the back of the room, Zarkith watched the proceedings with a scowl. He was no politician, he was a warrior, and warriors despised weakness. To him, the humans were an infestation, unworthy of standing on Archelion soil. As Olivia spoke, his patience frayed. The words of peace grated against his pride, and his hands clenched into fists. "You dare speak of coexistence?" Zarkith bellowed, stepping forward. His voice echoed through the chamber, silencing all conversation. The Archelion Council turned to him, alarmed. "These humans invaded our system, trespassed on sacred grounds, and now they lecture us on peace?" "Zarkith," Altar began, his tone firm. "This is not your place, Dash." "It is my place." Zarkith roared, his crimson eyes blazing. "Our ancestors bled for this soil, and you welcome these intruders?" Olivia held her ground, her expression calm but alert. "Ambassador Zarkith, humanity has no interest in war. We're here to seek understanding." Zarkith sneered. "Understanding? Let me show you how Archelions understand weakness." Before anyone could intervene, Zarkith surged forward, his massive frame cutting through the air like a thunderbolt. His bioarmor pulsed with energy, and his fist connected with Olivia's chest in a brutal arc. The force sent her flying backward, crashing into one of the crystalline pillars. Gasps filled the chamber. Olivia groaned as she struggled to stand, her breath knocked out of her. A sharp pain radiated from her side, but she refused to show weakness. Propping herself up on one knee, she met Zarkith's glare with defiance. "You shouldn't have done that," she said, her voice low but unwavering. Unbeknownst to Zarkith, his actions were being broadcast live to the Erebus, Earth's flagship orbiting the planet. Commander John Trenholm, Olivia's husband, sat in the command chair, his jaw tightening as he watched the scene unfold. His fingers gripped the armrests of his seat, and the bridge crew could feel the tension radiating from him. "Sir," one of the officers ventured cautiously, "what are your orders?" John's voice was ice cold. "Prep the drop pod." "Sir, should we dash?" "I said prep the pod," John snapped, his gaze fixed on the screen. "Now." Back on the planet, Olivia pushed herself to her feet, squaring her shoulders despite the pain. "You've just made a grave mistake, Zarkith," she said, her tone steely. Zarkith laughed, a guttural, mocking sound. "And what will you do about it, human?" In orbit, John's pod launched from the Erebus, streaking through the atmosphere like a meteor. The people of Archelion 7 had no idea what was coming. High above Archelion 7, aboard the Earth flagship Erebus, Commander John Trenholm stood like a storm contained within human form. The bridge was silent except for the hum of monitors and the occasional crackle of comms chatter. All eyes were on the commander as he watched the live feed of the incident unfold in the Archelion Council chamber. The sight of his wife, Captain Olivia Trenholm, staggering to her feet after Zarkatha's assault sent a ripple of rage through him. John clenched his fists, his knuckles white under the gloves of his combat suit. It wasn't just anger, it was the deep, primal instinct of a soldier protecting his own. Commander, Lieutenant Harkness spoke cautiously from the comm station. The Council is attempting to contain the situation. We're receiving requests for de-escalation. John's jaw tightened. Is the drop pod prepped? Yes, sir, but then ready my armor. I'm going down. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone knew what John Trenholm was capable of. His reputation as Earth's most decorated space marine preceded him. But launching himself into a diplomatic flashpoint was a move that could spiral into full-scale war. Commander, Harkness began, his tone careful. If I may, protocol dictates that the Council should handle this internally. An unauthorized intervention could. John turned, his expression a cold mask. Lieutenant, Zarkath struck a human diplomat, my wife, during a sanctioned negotiation. This isn't just protocol. It's personal. And if you think I'm standing by while she's in danger, you're mistaken. The silence that followed was heavy. No one dared argue further. The crew respected John not just for his combat skills, but for his unyielding loyalty. When he fought, it was never for himself, it was for his people, his cause, and, above all, his family. Meanwhile, back on the surface, the council chamber was in chaos. Archelion guards had encircled Zarkath, their biostaves glowing with defensive energy. Olivia stood her ground, ignoring the pain radiating through her body. Her breathing was shallow, but her resolve was unshaken. Stand down, Zarkath, commanded High Chancellor Altar, his tone sharp with authority. Your actions dishonor this council. Zarkath, unrepentant, spat on the crystalline floor. You dishonor our ancestors by pandering to these invaders. I simply did what you lacked the courage to do. Olivia's voice cut through the uproar like a blade. You've crossed a line, Zarkath. And I assure you, humanity doesn't take such acts lightly. Zarkath turned to her, his glowing eyes narrowing. You dare to threaten me, after the spectacle you've become? Olivia's lips curved into a faint smile. Not a threat. A warning. Suddenly, the chamber trembled as a distant rumble shook the ground. Heads turned toward the translucent walls, which shimmered with light as an object streaked across the sky, leaving a fiery trail in its wake. The Erebus had deployed a drop pod, and it was coming in fast. In the control room of the council complex, technicians scrambled to identify the incoming object. High Chancellor, one of them called urgently, an Earth drop pod is breaching our airspace. Impact expected in 60 seconds. Althar's already tense expression darkened. By the stars, what is the meaning of this? Olivia's earpiece crackled to life. Hold position, came John's calm, measured voice. I'm on my way. Relief flooded through her, though she didn't let it show. You didn't need to come down here, she replied, keeping her tone neutral. Maybe not, John said. But I did. The drop pod hit the surface like a meteor, embedding itself into the crystalline terrain just outside the council chamber. A plume of dust and fire shot into the air, scattering shards of glowing minerals. The pod's hatch hissed open, and John Trenholm stepped out. He was a vision of power in his advanced combat armor. The sleek, black exoskeleton hummed with energy, glowing faintly at the joints. Plasma gauntlets encased his hands, and his graph sword rested at his side, its blade shimmering with a faint blue aura. His helmet retracted, revealing a face that was equal parts rugged and determined, his eyes fixed on the council chamber ahead. Inside, Zarketh stared at the scene unfolding outside. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his features. "What is this?" he growled, his bravado faltering. "That," Olivia said coolly, "is my husband." The chamber doors burst open, and John strode in, his every step echoing with purpose. He surveyed the room, his gaze pausing briefly on Olivia before landing on Zarketh. "Which one of you thought it was a good idea to lay hands on my wife?" he asked, his voice low and deliberate. Zarketh stepped forward, regaining some of his confidence. "I am Zarketh, warrior of the Archelian people. You would do well to leave this place before you embarrass yourself." John tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "Zarketh, is it? You made 2 mistakes today. First, you hit her. Second, you didn't finish the job." Zarketh snarled, drawing his energy blades. "Are you challenging me, human?" John unsheathed his graph sword, its hum filling the chamber like the prelude to a storm. His voice was steady, almost calm. "No. I'm ending this." The council chamber fell silent, the air crackling with tension as the 2 combatants prepared to clash. Olivia crossed her arms, a faint smirk playing at her lips. She knew what was about to happen and she didn't envy Zarketh in the slightest. The council chamber fell silent as John Trenholm and Zarketh squared off, the tension in the air so thick it was almost palpable. Around them, Archelian guards formed a loose perimeter, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. High Chancellor Altar tried to step forward, his voice raised in protest. "Commander Trenholm, Zarketh, this is a place of peace. It stopped being peaceful," John interrupted, his voice cold as steel, "the moment your warrior laid hands on my wife." Zarketh sneered, his energy blades humming to life in his hands, casting a menacing red glow across the chamber. "You humans are all the same, arrogant, weak, and undeserving of this galaxy's respect. I will crush you as I did her." John raised his graph sword, the blade shimmering with a faint blue aura. "Talk is cheap, alien. Let's see what you've got." Without warning, Zarketh lunged forward, his massive frame moving with surprising speed. His first strike was meant to decapitate, but John sidestepped with practiced precision, his graph sword deflecting the blade in a shower of sparks. The floor beneath them cracked from the force of their clash. Zarketh growled and unleashed a flurry of powerful strikes, each one capable of splitting stone. But John held his ground, blocking and parrying with the ease of a seasoned warrior. His armor absorbed the kinetic impact of the blows, its energy field pulsing in response. "Is this it?" John taunted as he dodged another swing. "You were bragging a minute ago." Zarketh roared in frustration and activated his bioarmor's overload mode. Neon energy surged across his body, amplifying his strength and speed. With a primal scream, he slammed both blades downward in an overhead strike, aiming to crush John into the crystalline floor. John raised his graph sword with both hands to block, and the impact sent a shockwave rippling through the chamber. The Archelian delegates stumbled back, shielding their eyes as fragments of the floor erupted around the combatants. Despite the force of the attack, John didn't budge. His armor's stabilizers kept him rooted to the ground, and his graph sword absorbed the brunt of the energy. With a sharp twist, he redirected Zarketh's momentum, sending the alien warrior staggering to the side. "That all you got?" John said, stepping forward. Olivia watched from the sidelines, her arms crossed, an amused expression on her face. She knew John wasn't just fighting for her honor, he was sending a message. Every calculated strike, every deflection, was a testament to human resilience and the strength of those who protected it. "Get him, John," she muttered under her breath, a small smirk forming. Zarketh recovered quickly, his eyes blazing with fury. "You are nothing," he bellowed, activating a set of plasma projectiles embedded in his armor. He fired a barrage of glowing orbs toward John, each one capable of incinerating its target on contact. But John was ready. He activated his suit's energy shield, a shimmering barrier that absorbed the projectiles and redirected their energy back at Zarkith. The alien warrior barely had time to react before one of the redirected blasts struck his shoulder, sending him reeling. John seized the opening. Closing the distance in an instant, he delivered a devastating blow with his graph sword, slashing through Zarkith's armor and leaving a deep, glowing scar across his chest. Zarkith cried out in pain, dropping to one knee. "It's over," John said, his graph sword pointed at Zarkith's throat. "Yield." For a moment, the room was still. Zarkith's labored breathing filled the chamber as he glared up at John, his pride warring with the reality of his defeat. Blood, a molten silver-like substance, trickled from the wound on his chest. Finally, he lowered his head. "I yield," he growled, his voice thick with resentment. John stepped back, lowering his sword but keeping his guard up. He turned to the council. "This is the warrior who represents your people? A brute who resorts to violence instead of reason?" High Chancellor Altar stepped forward, his expression a mix of shame and determination. "Zarkith's actions do not represent us. He has violated our sacred codes and endangered this council's mission. Guards, remove him." The Archelian guards moved in, binding Zarkith's wrists with energy restraints. As they led him away, Zarkith snarled at John. "This isn't over, human. I'll return, and when I do dash." John cut him off with a cold glare. "If you come back, you'll wish you hadn't." The room began to settle, the council members exchanging hushed words as they tried to process what had just transpired. Olivia approached John, her smirk softening into a warm smile. "Nice entrance," she said, her voice laced with affection. John chuckled, his armor retracting slightly to reveal his face. "You know me. Subtlety isn't my strong suit." "Could have fooled me," she replied, leaning in to kiss his cheek. "Thanks for having my back." "Always," John said, his tone softening for the first time since he'd arrived. High Chancellor Altar addressed the room, his voice ringing with authority. "Let it be known that Zarkith acted against the will of this council. His actions will not derail our efforts for peace. Captain Trenholm, Commander Trenholm, we extend our deepest apologies and gratitude." John nodded, his gaze lingering on Olivia. "Apology accepted. But let's make sure this doesn't happen again." As the council prepared to resume negotiations, John and Olivia stepped aside, sharing a quiet moment. Though the immediate danger had passed, both knew the fight for peace was far from over. The aftermath of the clash left the Archelian council chamber in a state of uneasy calm. Delegates whispered amongst themselves, casting wary glances at the humans. The shattered floor, scorched walls, and the lingering hum of dissipated energy told the story of the battle that had just unfolded. High Chancellor Altar, flanked by his advisors, called the council to order. "Let this incident serve as a reminder," Altar began, his voice resonating across the chamber, "that recklessness and violence undermine the very fabric of diplomacy. Zarkith's actions were his own, not a reflection of the Archelian people or our commitment to peace." He turned to Olivia and John Trenholm, who stood together near the center of the chamber. Olivia, though still nursing bruises from the assault, radiated quiet confidence. John's imposing figure, his armor still faintly glowing from the battle, exuded a protective strength that made the alien delegates wary of further confrontation. "Captain Trenholm," Altar continued, "Commander Trenholm, we owe you both an apology. Zarkith's exile is only the beginning of his punishment. The council will ensure such behavior is not repeated." Olivia stepped forward, her voice clear and resolute. "Apologies are appreciated, High Chancellor, but actions speak louder than words. Humanity came here to build a partnership, not to fight. If this partnership is to mean anything, there must be safeguards to prevent violence from derailing progress." Altar nodded solemnly. "You are correct. The Council will institute stricter security measures during negotiations and will enforce a binding code of conduct among all delegates. Good, Olivia said. Then let's continue the discussions. Humanity still believes in peace, even after this setback. As the council session adjourned for the day, Olivia and John were escorted to a private suite within the complex. The translucent walls of the chamber displayed a stunning view of Archelion 7's twin suns setting over crystalline mountains. Olivia sank into a chair, sighing as the adrenaline of the day finally wore off. "You okay?" John asked, kneeling in front of her and gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. She smirked. "I've had worse." "You know that." "Yeah, but this time I wasn't there to stop it before it happened." His voice was tinged with regret. Olivia placed a hand on his armored chest. "You got there when it mattered. Besides, you're not my bodyguard, John. I can handle myself." John chuckled, the tension easing slightly. "I know. But you're stuck with me anyway." Meanwhile, in the far reaches of Archelion 7's wilderness, Zarkatha's exile began. Shackled and stripped of his bioarmor, he was escorted to a barren plateau by Archelion guards. His punishment was to survive in the unforgiving wilderness, a test of endurance and reflection imposed by his people. As he stood alone under the crimson skies, his mind burned with resentment. The image of John Trenholm standing over him, victorious, replayed over and over. "This isn't over," he growled to himself, his glowing eyes narrowing with determination. "The humans will pay for this humiliation." Back in orbit, aboard the Earth flagship Erebus, Olivia and John reflected on the day's events. They stood in the observation deck, looking down at the shimmering surface of Archelion 7. "You think they'll actually stick to the treaty?" John asked. "They don't have much choice," Olivia replied. "We proved today that humanity isn't just here to negotiate. We're here to stay." John smirked. "And they know better than to mess with us now." Olivia chuckled, leaning into his side. "Thanks to you." The comms officer interrupted their moment. "Captain, Commander, the Council has scheduled the treaty signing for tomorrow morning. They've requested your presence." John raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll try anything?" Olivia shook her head. "Not after what happened today. But just in case." She looked up at him, her eyes sparkling with humor. "You'll be ready to make another dramatic entrance, right?" John grinned. "Always." Epilogue. The following day, the treaty was signed in a ceremony broadcast across both planets. Olivia and John stood side by side as representatives of humanity, their presence a symbol of unity and strength. The treaty outlined strict guidelines for cooperation, shared exploration, and mutual respect, steps toward a more peaceful future. As the ceremony concluded, Olivia turned to John. "This is just the beginning, you know." John nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Yeah. But whatever's coming, we'll face it together." On the surface of Archelion 7, Zarkath watched the broadcast from a scavenged hologram projector. His expression was unreadable, but his glowing eyes burned with ambition. "They think this is the end," he muttered. "It's only the beginning."